I'm gonna throw this up.
All right. It was the perfect way to walk around on college campus. It's just, nobody asks you questions when you.
Yes. That's the biggest reason I use them instead of something else when I'm at the gym, because I do not want to be talked to. That is somewhere I do very poor ministry. I'm there for me.
Hey, somewhere's got to be for you.
Yeah. And I ended up finding a bunch of really good guys at the gym anyways. So I end up having to take them off constantly. But good guys, worth it. All right, I think we're good. All right, we'll hang out for a bit and see what happens. How was this for you?
It was a little rushed. Like I said, the kids were kind of sick. And I almost told Ashley, I was like, well, I'm going to skip tonight because we've done 10. Because it was just, she had to get up super early for work. And I was like, you know what? No. So we got home from getting them from school. And I was cooking dinner. I was like, just sit on the couch. I cooked dinner. And I was taking notes and reading it in the meantime. And I did everything, fed the dogs. And I was like, all right, I'm going in. It's like I can't. No, but no, it was good. I got a lot more notes on 11 than 10.
Yeah, that's not surprising. 10 was good too, though, man. 10 had a lot in it. And I looked back. It looks like 10 is the one that I think had started this whole thing. Was I covered 10 on my own? Yeah, that one day. 10's packed. But 11 is crazy and hard.
Yeah, I noted a sarcasm verse in there.
Yeah, for sure. For sure.
Hey, Karina. Now I can finally
there she is.
Talk back.
Oh, yeah. Open widget. Your shipping rate is higher than the recommended. What? The bit rate is off? How do I think I know how to do that, actually. Man, I remember when it was way simpler than this. Everybody on TikTok, Kat, you're not included. Don't you have anything better to do than watch me do this? I feel like you hear my lecturing more than enough, sweet girl. Everybody is on TikTok. This is on YouTube. So if you're over on TikTok, all you're going to do is hear me talk. You cannot see the screen where we've got the chapters up, and you're not going to see the live chat over there either on TikTok. So move over to YouTube would be my recommendation. My username's the same everywhere. Kat says you should be flattered. Kat, why don't you go on YouTube at least then?
She doesn't want you to have any more views.
I know, right? She's like, no. Be broke.
Yep. You will make no money off me, sir.
Oh, she says, why don't I do both? Well, that would be the good wife move, to have both open. You should, realistically, you should have a bunch of ghost accounts. You should just be blowing things up. You
should have a supercomputer that has thousands.
Yeah. What do they call them? What do they call them? A troll farm, where you have 30 phones all plugged in doing something shady. God. All right, I hope this doesn't mess something up. I just changed the bit rate, which I don't know what that is, but I did what YouTube told me to do. So we'll see.
I don't see anything.
How that works. The recording seemed pretty decent, like quality-wise. It's kind of surprising, actually. She says, is it because I'm Russian? Yes, it is because you're Russian. Shanna says, be broke.
She should be like a hacker or something.
Yeah, exactly. Her mom is actually first generation from Russia.
Mm-hmm.
So this whole past year has been full of geographical jokes of wide variety.
You'll have to ask her one time. One of my friends' girlfriends was their grandma was Russian, and she always, you know how we say like it's raining cats and dogs.
Yeah.
but it's not literally cats and dogs.
Yeah.
There was something in Russian that means like I give up, but the saying is something like I throw the shotgun in the yard or something like that. And she
What?
was like,
Really?
yeah, she was like in Russia, that means like I give up.
Really?
But I
That's
don't know what the
interesting.
saying is. You'll have to ask.
Kat, I hope you heard that.
If she's not on YouTube, she didn't.
She's still not over there? Oh, baby. All right, Kat, I'll have to talk to you about something later. I'm very interested. She actually suggested that I bring her mom on for like an interview because and I'm gonna totally butcher this, so I'm sorry, Kat. But it's something to do. They were in Ukraine for a while. They lived in Ukraine for a while, like many years ago, when a bunch of political stuff was happening. So she has oh, there she is. Kat, what was it? Your mom, they lived in Ukraine for a little bit. Shannon's second generation from Ireland. I look like I'm second generation from Ireland, but I'm definitely not. Alex, good to see you, man. All right, we'll wait a couple more minutes and then we'll get this going. Did anybody read this ahead of time? Okay, besides Drew, obviously, and myself. Are you British mostly?
I don't know. When I did the little 23andMe or something like that, and it said like majority was more like England area.
Really?
I don't know. I'd have to look at it again, but I was looking for more. Like I was expecting more Irish stuff to like pop out, but
yeah, I would think.
Hey, Spooka.
What's going on?
I'm not gonna type all of this.
Okay, come here real quick. We got a couple minutes to kill.
Okay, where's the thingy?
The mic's right there.
Okay, hi. How in depth do you want me to go? Like,
I mean, quick. You
wise?
know. No, not super far.
Okay,
Not super far. Yeah.
That's okay.
We'll keep it light till mom's on.
My family, my Russian family, they lived in Kiev in Russia for 12 years. My mom lived there. I don't know how long before then. But there was family in Ukraine at that time as well. And then there was some in Russia and Siberia too. Wow. Long story short, they moved from Russia due to religion. And they lived in Ukraine for, I would say, like 6 to 9 years.
Oh, wow.
And they had to flee from the Ukraine because of religion. And you can kind of fill in the blanks if you know anything about religion in Ukraine right now. And that's how they came to America. They came to America in 91, I think it was.
If you have no idea what she's talking about, I'm gonna bring her mom on and we're gonna talk, and Kat will probably be on too.
Yeah.
But we'll talk on a different stream so that we don't muddy the water on this politically. But it's very interesting stuff. And if you don't know the religion thing and the persecution in Ukraine, you can do a quick Google search and figure out what we're talking about.
Well, maybe not Google anymore, but
yeah, well, true.
DuckDuckGo.
Yeah, DuckDuckGo.
It's probably just a scam too.
Brave search.
The rest of the family eventually had to come as well.
Yeah.
We all started slowly coming, but
yeah, that's gonna be interesting. It'll be
first grandchild born in America. Which, if you know anything about like being an immigrant and then being the first one born that isn't an immigrant, it is not the greatest of times, especially being a female.
Yeah, true.
So there's that.
That's true.
And I'm the only granddaughter. Still.
That's also true.
My life is rough.
And then the other things, yeah.
And all the other things.
Oh,
Spooka.
Cool. Yeah, that'll be good. It'll be interesting to do that.
Okay. Well, my people are calling, so I gotta go.
All right, sweetheart. Thanks.
Yeah. I love you, Spooka.
I love you too.
I love you, Spooka. I love you, Spooka.
Thanks.
I love you.
But mainly the cat.
Where's your food? Here.
Yeah, take that.
Let me eat.
Take that.
Yeah, just me.
All right. Did I miss anything that should be addressed here before we go?
Okay, love you. Bye.
Love you. Been chasing a toddler around most of the day. I get that. I'm glad those days are over, actually. My kid's past that phase. Now she's expected to do everything herself.
I'm not there yet.
So yeah. That's a good phase. When the kid's at the phase of survive or don't. Your choice. Figure it out. All right. Let me see. So I think we'll do the prayer requests and everything at the end probably would be good. So if anybody has anything kind of as we go, you can throw that in. And Drew, you can just help me keep an eye on it in case I miss it. But
I'll write it down if somebody throws it.
Yeah, that'd be great. So we're going to start closing with the prayer. I believe it was Shannon who got us going with that, which was a lovely idea. So we'll close again with that today. So if you have anything you want us to pray about when we do that, there's a section now in the Discord that you can put that in there, but otherwise just throw it in the chat and then we'll put it in Discord for you. And then that'll make me not forget to do that. And you guys can let me know when you want it taken out and I'll just kind of keep it in there until then. So let's get rolling. We got 10 and 11. Warning against idolatry. For I do not want you to be unaware, brothers, that our fathers were all under the cloud. The cloud represents God's presence among the Israelites. So one thing you really have to understand about chapter 10 is it is honestly from memory one of the most reference-packed texts that Paul put out, meaning like volume and in how it's condensed. So depending on what Bible you're reading from, there will be subnotes like every 3 words. So this entire chapter, he's referring back to Numbers a lot. He's referring back to Exodus a lot. He's referring to Galatians a good amount. But the majority of it is him pushing you back to the Old Testament. So he's using Old Testament laws and Old Testament references to try to connect and push points across. So it's, if you ever want to do a kind of deep study with this, I would pull up 2 Bibles, get one version, the normal version you're reading that has the subnotes, and then open another Bible into the Old Testament so you can kind of see. I'll reference a lot of them here, but it's literally every couple of words, so it would take a really long time. But it's interesting to see just how much he did that in this one, in the fact that it's kind of abnormal as compared to most of what he writes. So the cloud is the reference of God's presence among the Israelites that comes out of Exodus, chapter 13, and also chapter 40. And all passed through the sea. All went through the sea refers to the Red Sea. So he's still back there in Exodus, which God parted so that Moses and the Israelites could escape from the Egyptian army. So that whole reference pushes you to Exodus. Verse 2, and all were baptized into Moses in the cloud and in the sea. Same references there. 3. Oh, I went right past it. 3, and all ate the same spiritual food, and all drank the same spiritual drink. For they drank from the spiritual rock that followed them, and the rock was Christ. The rock was Christ is obviously figurative, but it's in the sense of he's basing it off of the reading of the description of the rock out of, again, he's in Exodus. He's in chapter 17 on that one. And it's also a reference to Numbers chapter 21. So note here says, despite Christ's accompaniment and provision of water in the desert, the people still complained about God's provision and rebelled against his leadership. Paul urged the Corinthians not to follow the Israelites' example of complaining about provisions given by the rock, again, referring to Christ. So if you didn't know, or if you're not Old Testament savvy, the Israelites were a very complainy people. They were constantly complaining about what God was doing, how he was doing it, kind of the method that he went about it. It was kind of a theme for them. So he's saying, Corinthians, you're displaying the same behavior. Understand it didn't bode well for the Israelites. It's not going to bode well for you. So stop complaining. Verse 5, nevertheless, with most of them, God was not pleased, for they were overthrown in the wilderness. That is a reference to being struck down in the desert. And that is the first generation whom Moses delivered from Egypt, experienced God's mighty power and glory. Their idolatry and disobedience led to punishment. Again, it did not bode well for them. Paul here warns the Corinthian believers to avoid idolatry, lest they too come under divine wrath. He's got 2 references there to Numbers and then to a verse out of Psalm. Verse 6, now these things took place as examples for us, that we might not desire evil as they did. Do not be idolaters, as some of them were. As it is written, the people sat down to eat and drink and rose up to play. This is again a reference to Exodus. The idolaters, where the Israelites fashioned a golden calf. So I feel like most people are at least relatively familiar with that story. They fashioned a golden calf and then they worshiped that golden calf. The idolaters were then killed in that scenario. So again, not boding well for the Israelites. Paul uses that event to warn the Corinthian believers to avoid participating in pagan festivals and meals, because those were 2 big things. I think we've already talked about it in some of the subsequent chapters, but meals were a super big deal in Corinth. It was a status thing. It was a gathering thing. It was a massive pagan worship thing. And that's kind of where the idea of the Lord's Supper became really big in 1 Corinthians and 2 Corinthians. He refers to it a lot because it was kind of the Christian answer to something that was fundamentally pagan at the time. And their Christian way of doing it, they were starting to intermingle it with old pagan ways of doing that. And so throughout both of these letters, Paul keeps reminding them that the Lord's Supper is a different thing and needs to be practiced in a different way. But in that specific verse, he's talking about pagan festivals because you had a lot, again, I think we talked about it last week, you had a lot of Corinthian congregants that were going back to paganism, and they were being a part of these old pagan festivals again. So they were getting back into the pagan culture and out of the Christian culture. He argues that the festivals that they were going to obviously was leading to even further and more idolatry. Verse 8, we must not indulge in sexual immorality, as some of them did, and 23,000 fell in a single day. Another Old Testament reference refers to, where was this? This was in Numbers 25, when Israelites men engaged in sexual relations with the Mennonites, female religious prostitutes. In judgment, God sent a plague. Did not bode well for them. Verse 9, we must not put Christ to the test, as some of them did, and were destroyed by serpents. Paul is referring here to committing evil as to whether God will respond in judgment. So it's basically a push on the previous verse, saying if you guys continue this in the way that you're doing it, you're putting Christ to the test, you're going to get judged in some form or fashion. Verse 10, nor grumble. You got to stop right there. Grumble is actually very important. It's something that you're going to pass by if you don't know. He's referring to Korah's rebellion. And the Israelites' grumbling was against Moses and Aaron, comes out of Numbers. The grumbling against God, despite his continued provisions and protections, as we spoke about earlier, they were very complainy. God was providing anyways. They didn't feel that it was adequate. It was very typical of the Israelites during that period when they were in the wilderness to do this grumbling. And then that term of grumble, you'll see kind of brought up in the New Testament, specifically by Paul numerous times. And that is what he's referring to. He's always referring back to Exodus, Numbers, and Deuteronomy, where you read about that, how they were acting when they were in the wilderness. Continuing there at 10, as some of them did and were destroyed by the destroyer. That part is kind of interesting because there's a lot of debate. It seems it could go either way, but a lot of people believe that this is actually a reference to angels that you see in the Old Testament fulfilling God's judgment. So in Numbers, you see that, in Exodus, you see that, and in 2 Samuel, you also see these references to the destroyer in this context being possibly referring to judgment angels. The other side is obviously referring to Satan. So it's one that isn't clear. People go different ways on it. It's hard to say. But either way, it's something that is negative. Either way, it is negative in context. Verse 11, now these things happened to them as an example, but they were written down for our instruction, on whom the end of the ages has come. Verse 12, therefore let anyone who thinks that he stands take heed lest he fall. Remember, the Corinthian believers did not consider themselves to be in danger with any of the stuff they were doing. So Paul is walking that fine line of saying you have freedom in Christ. All things are not helpful. All things don't build up. but all things are lawful. He's having a hard time with them because they're justifying a lot of their behavior. And say they were good Christians and they were doing everything else right and they weren't causing their brothers and sisters to stumble, Paul would probably have a different tune. But the problem is they were doing these things, walking that line of Christian freedom. And then also in almost every case, they were taking it too far. They were taking it to extremes. They were walking outside of kind of the bounds that he had given them when he planted the church. So the Corinthians did not ever really believe they were in danger when they were participating in the feasts or in the festivals. And they were. And he's going to go on to kind of explain a little bit more of that here in a minute. 13, no temptation has overtaken you that is not common to man. It's another one that honestly is kind of confusing. It seems rather straightforward. There's a lot of debate. Scripture depicts God testing the faith of his followers often, or allowing other heavenly beings to tempt people. If nothing pops into your head with allowing other heavenly beings to tempt people, think about Job for a minute. And I feel like once we eventually get to Job, that is going to be very, very long, because Job is theologically insane. It's really, really hard to theologically make sense of Job, because you have God basically making evil to Job, to Job's family, to his life permissible. And a lot of people believe that's what this is kind of a reference to. So in Genesis, you have God testing the faith of his followers. And then in Job, you have God allowing other divine beings to tempt people for a greater cause, but allowing it nonetheless. Continuing at 13 there, God is faithful and he will not let you be tempted beyond your ability. But with temptation, he will also provide a way of escape that you may be able to endure it. Luckily, that is all very straightforward. There's nothing fancy or theological there. You're going to be tested. You're going to be tempted. Life is hard. The world is not God's. It's obviously run by somebody much more sinister and evil. For those who are faithful, for those who are tuned in, for those who understand what is going on, there will always be an escape of some kind, and you will always have the endurance to be able to deal with that. 14, therefore, my beloved, flee from idolatry. 15, I speak as to sensible people. Judge for yourselves what I say. The cup of blessing that we bless is it not a participation in the blood of Christ? The bread that we break, is it not a participation in the body of Christ? 17, because there is one bread, we who are many are one body, for we all partake of the one bread, referring to Christ, obviously. 18, consider the people of Israel. There are three in that one 4-word section, consider the people of Israel. The version that I read gives you 6 different subnotes to go look at. That's just an example of how historically packed and how many references, and it doesn't come across that way in the English. It just seems like a sentence. But in the original Greek, the way it's structured, the way that he's writing it, it's very obvious that he's trying to refer them back to things beyond him. Because again, if you remember last week, his apostleship, his authority is to a point, to a degree, being questioned by the Church of Corinth. So this is very justifying. He's trying to justify beyond just himself. And that's why he even said right before, he said, judge for yourselves what I say. And then he tries to give them scripture to kind of push it. So 18, consider the people of Israel are not those who eat the sacrifice participants in the altar. What do I imply then? That food offered to idols is anything? Or that an idol is anything? 20. No, I imply that what pagans sacrifice, they offer to demons and not to God. What does that mean? I feel like we already hit this in one of the previous chapters, or was this the one that I did on my own? Where he says, are idols anything?
Yeah, it was the one you did on your own.
Was it the one? Okay, so he's being sarcastic. He's being kind of ironic. But he's saying idols are literal inanimate objects. Them in and of themselves mean nothing. But if you're going to consider them anything, they're being offered to a false god. They're being offered to demons and not to God. I do not want you to be participants with demons. 21, you cannot drink the cup of the Lord and the cup of demons. So you cannot be double-minded. You can't be doing those things and then coming to the church and practicing Christianity. Those two things are hard lines. whereas Paul is big on the tightrope walk of freedom and Christianity. These are fine lines. These are things you cannot do. 21, you cannot drink the cup of the Lord and the cup of demons. You cannot partake of the table of the Lord and the table of demons. 22, shall we provoke the Lord to jealousy? Are we stronger than he? Did you have anything here before we go on to that next section?
I don't think I can follow that with anything. That was
Cover most of it?
yeah.
Okay. All right, 23 then. All right, let's see if there's anything here then. Job is literally my favorite book too, actually. I think I've preached out of Job more than out of anything else. It's truly insane. And just theology wise, because I'm a total theology geek. Theology in Job is wild. It's wild. During past trials. Yeah, for sure. Job's great for a lot of reasons. Theologically, it's great. And then also, yeah, like you said, Corinne, that's really good for when you need some reassurance that maybe your life isn't so bad right now. That guy had it rough. All right, then moving on. Do all things to the glory of God. 23. All things are lawful. Here he goes, reiterating the same things over and over again. It's an obvious indication that these are things you need to listen to. All things are lawful, but not all things are helpful. All things are lawful, but not all things build up. 24. Let no one seek his own good, but the good of his neighbor. Paul's big push. And then he's going to go real in depth on it here in just a minute. 25. Eat whatever is sold in the market. Okay, you need context for this. This was the one I did by myself. So in Corinth, we've talked about it briefly, but you have geographically where the Church of Corinth is a major trade station. You have a lot of docks with shipping and sailors coming in and out, moving goods. You have connecting pieces of land where there's a lot of travel. This is part of why prostitution was such a big deal here. But it also means that they have a very flourishing market. So at the market, what would happen simply is you'd have all of these pagan worship centers, all these pagan churches in the surrounding area, usually up on hills is how it's explained, that they're usually up higher ground. And what they would do is they would sacrifice portions of meat to idols in the pagan temples. And then they would eat some of that meat. What was left of the meat, they would bring down the hill to the market, and then they would sell that meat at the market. So the Corinthian church started asking Paul some questions about the efficacy of eating the meat from the market. Whether if you know it was that it was sacrificed to an idol, are we okay to eat it? Well, what about if you don't know? What if they don't tell you? You may be buying meat that was sacrificed to an idol. How are we supposed to navigate this? So this is what he's responding to in this section. So he said, 24, let no one seek his own good, but the good of his neighbor. 25, eat whatever is sold in the meat market without raising any question on the ground of conscience. So what is he saying? He's saying, it doesn't matter. Eat it. Don't worry about it. Not a big deal. Whatever. 26, for the earth is the Lord's and the fullness thereof. Saying, these animals are of the earth. These animals are of God. You are good to eat them. This is all God's stuff anyways. 27, if one of the unbelievers invites you to dinner and you are disposed to go, eat whatever is set before you without raising any question on the ground of conscience. So again, he's kind of reiterating, you're good to go. You're good to eat that. But, verse 28, but if someone says to you, and this is where it gets tricky, if someone says to you, this has been offered in sacrifice, then do not eat it. So he's referring then to, say you are at dinner with some believers, some unbelievers. One of the unbelievers brings out the food. Say they're the host. You're at their house. They bring out the food. And they say, this was sacrificed. This was offered as a sacrifice up at the pagan temple on the hill. He says, in that case, where clarity has been provided, and you are in a public setting around other people, and you don't know their spiritual status, you don't know their spiritual confidence, where they're at in their walk, any of that stuff. He says, do not eat it. For the sake of one for the sake of the one who informed you. So that person who gave it to you in their ignorance, obviously being an unbeliever, and for the sake of conscience. I do not mean your conscience, because he's assuming as a Christian, you are able to walk this line of freedom, and that to you, idolatry is nothing, and to you, that shouldn't matter. That doesn't matter. It is just food. It is of God. You're good. So do not mean of your conscience, but his. So this is for the benefit of the unbeliever. This is for the benefit of the ignorant, to the benefit of the person who does not have that confidence, that understanding of this means nothing to me, that it was sacrificed to an idol. It's just food. This animal is God's. I'm going to sustain my body with that and be fine. In this case, and we've talked about it in some of the previous chapters, you could be causing somebody to stumble. So for why should my liberty be determined by someone else's conscience? Rhetorical question. 30. If I partake with thankfulness, why am I denounced because of that for which I give thanks? So if I take this as good food from God, why is that bad? Why is that not okay? 31. So whether you eat or drink or whatever you do all of it to the glory of God. 32. Give no offense to Jews or Greeks or to the church of God. Paul's urging the Corinthian people to avoid anything, doing any kind of action or behavior that could cause somebody else to reject the gospel. This is brought up a lot when you talk about Christians drinking or smoking weed or getting tattoos, whatever it is, the image that you're putting out, to people who are not Christian, to people who don't understand, they don't have full context, they don't get the rules, they think you're just doing something of the world. So he's saying specifically to the Corinthians to avoid those types of actions because you could be causing an already very faltering people to reject the gospel message. 33. Just as I try to please everyone in everything I do, not seeking my own advantage, but that of many, that they may be saved.
Ooh.
Yeah. It's real good. It's real good. All right, I'm going to pause there for a minute and see if you guys have any questions on any of that, because I know that is confusing, but that's a fundamental concept to be understood by every Christian, that it's not black and white. There are times you should not drink. There are times you should not smoke weed. There are times you should be very conscious of who your audience is, of who you're around, of who, because at any time, at any place, no matter what, technically as a Christian, you should be ministering in some way, whether it's just by how you're behaving or the actions that you're doing. So this is the message he's trying to get across. He's the one who says, I'll be all things to all people. So when he's around certain people, he's not going to behave a certain way. Whether he can or not is not the question. The question that he's posing is that good for the people I'm around? It's not about your personal freedom in every situation. You have the liberty. My liberty is determined by someone else's conscience? Rhetorical question. To a degree, yes. You have some responsibility to act in a certain way, depending on the audience, depending on who is around you, so that you do not cause somebody else to stumble who may be a weaker Christian, but also so that you do not muddy up the gospel message to somebody who is ignorant to what that freedom under Christ actually is. I hope that makes sense. I was just about to say that's how I view alcohol. Yeah, exactly, Marshall. Exactly. With restraint. Yup. So it's okay to smoke weed as long as it's not in a public setting. That is a question for another day. I will. I'll cover that soon because I obviously I get asked that a lot. It's complicated. The answer is yes and no. Yes and no, for sure.
Rich.
Yeah, I mean that's pretty much it. Conviction's a big deal. Paul's a big freedom guy, man, and I feel like a lot of people miss that.
You've been a hippie.
Yeah. I mean, he's very Christianity wise, like behaviorally, he's very liberal, but it can't just be about you. It's not what are you allowed to do? You are allowed to do virtually anything with very few limits. It's about whether you should or not. is kind of his whole spiel if you had to put it
Yes.
into a sentence.
He just summed it all up.
That is the thesis statement. I personally never done it because I always thought it was against Christ. And if that's a conviction you have, then don't do that. 100%. If that's how you feel and you feel like that's coming from God or coming from something outside of you, don't smoke weed. You have your answer. That's why it's yes and no. It's more complicated than just can you. But that's personal convictions outweigh anything else, in my opinion. I'll give you guys like 20 more seconds and then we'll jump into the next section. You got head coverings. What every woman wants to talk about. This is tough, man. Some of these things and some of these, specifically Corinthians, it gets rough.
Yeah, see, that's why I love having you. You know all the background and everything. I just read it and make some notes.
But even then, man, at least I'm honest. I'm gonna tell you when it doesn't make sense. I'm gonna tell you when we don't know. Just don't have the answer. It's just more often than I like. All right.
That's why.
Let's do it. Head coverings. This is chapter 11. Oh,
Shannon dropped a question.
okay, good. Does that
Yeah,
also
I'm
tie
about
with
hard ones,
premarital sex? I'm actually doing that next. Premarital sex has been shoved down my throat on TikTok for the past 3 weeks. So I have it all. All my notes are all done. So that'll be the next. I think I have a video scheduled to go up tomorrow. So not that one, but it should be probably Monday of next week. Premarital sex will go up. It's tough, man. It's tough. It's tough stuff. All right. 11. Be imitators of me as I am of Christ. Head coverings. Verse 2. Now I commend you because you remember me in everything and maintain the traditions, even as I delivered them to you. 3. But I want you to understand that the head of every man is Christ, the head of every wife is her husband, and the head of Christ is God. The term head here, the Greek term, and I say this very clearly, it might imply authority, or it could also come from the idea of a source. The term could have either meaning in Old Greek literature. So for academics, for pastors, for your friend on the street, to say that this translates easily is either ignorance or it is a lie. This term does not translate easily. So it could have either the meaning of authority or of a source in Old Greek literature. Alternatively, the word may denote, it could also mean kind of a combination of things, which is honestly more of where I lean with it, because it seems contextually that it could kind of be a mixture of being authoritative, but also being literally the source of. So verse 4, and we'll get more into it. Every man who prays or prophesies with his head covered dishonors his head. But every wife who prays or prophesies with her head uncovered dishonors her head. 4. No, we just did 4. 5. Every wife who prays or prophesies with her head uncovered, we just read that, dishonors her head, since it is the same as if her head were shaven. So, prophesying is obviously a keynote there that you need to really keep in mind. These are very specific things. And before we get into any of the rest of this, please remember what we're reading. This is the part where you need to be above most of Christianity. You are reading a handwritten letter that was sent directly to one specific church with a specific congregation. Are these things, off the top of your head, and then I'll answer the rhetorical question, are these things that Paul shoved down other churches' throats? And this, I'm neither saying that it doesn't apply to everyone or that it applies to everyone. These are just things we actually know for sure, and then we'll talk about the things we don't know. This was a letter to a church. It was meant for a specific group of people who, let's be honest, were massively messed up. Of all the churches Paul wrote letters to, nobody comes close to the dysfunction of the Corinthian church. So these are things you have to keep in mind. And again, it doesn't mean one thing or the other. It's just, it's overall context that you have to keep in mind when you're reading these things. You have to. So with the uncovered head, Paul's comment, it assumes that the cultural practice of covering a woman's hair and head during times of worship, Paul discouraged women from uncovering their head in this context. It's point blank, but he's going to go more into it. 6, for if a wife will not cover her head, then she should cut her hair short. But since it is disgraceful for a wife to cut her hair or shave her head, let her cover her head. In this time, in this period, and then again, specifically in Corinth, this was a thing that did not transfer to other churches in a general sense. A woman with an uncovered head might have been considered sexually revealing. That doesn't transfer everywhere. But in this area, with what was going on here, and again, keep in mind, you have some of this, I won't call it cross-dressing, but you have men becoming more effeminate. That was beginning to be a thing that we later saw in Rome become massively big, to the point that women were trying to take on the role of a man, and men were becoming very effeminate and practicing homosexuality. Some of that stemmed early on from Corinth. So it may have been considered sexually revealing. That is one idea that kind of makes sense, and thus a distraction to men in the context of worship. So another way of looking at that would be like, women don't wear a mini skirt to church on Sunday. Why? Well, because men are weak and men are sexual creatures, and men might look after you in ways that maybe they don't want to, or maybe they're creeps and they're going to anyways. Regardless, it could open somebody up to having impure thoughts. Paul therefore recommends that women should wear head coverings to avoid such issues. That is a possibility. None of this is clear in this section. So these are all possibilities. 7, for a man ought not to cover his head, since he is the image and glory of God. But woman is the glory of man. That refers back to the head issue, right? Because we're using that term still. Throughout this whole section, we're using that term of head that in Greek can go either way. And to say it's just that one, it's just authoritative, or it's just a source, is dishonest. It just is. It's very dishonest. Within the context, it's hard to be able to say this is exactly what it means. So these are possibilities. Verse 8, for man was not made for woman, but woman made for man. That is obviously an Old Testament reference. 9, neither was man created for woman, but woman for man. I love this. This is super important to take note of. So you have in 8, for man was not made for woman, but woman from man. Then 9, he goes into it. Neither was man created for woman, but woman made for man. And then he's going to go deeper into it. 10, that is why a wife ought to have her symbol of authority on her head because of the angels. But before you get too crazy, the suggestion both satisfied the cultural norm, again, because it was culture, and would help resolve problems within the Corinthian community. This is my opinion, and I'll be real clear about that. My opinion is that this was primarily, mostly, if not completely, and I lean more towards completely, a specific cultural thing because of what I know about Corinth. If I didn't know these as much as I know about that geographical location and what was happening there as far as paganism, as far as prostitution, homosexuality, transgenderism back then, which we all are very familiar with now. In America, we wouldn't have been 15 years ago, 10 years ago, but now we very much are. This was prominent back then. All of this was extremely prominent at the time in that spot. So that is my opinion. And as I'm sure everybody knows, there are many who disagree with that. But you just don't see You don't see Paul confirming this across the board. We see him confirming all sorts of other things across the board. And I could be wrong. But I feel as if there's no concrete way to say it's one or the other. Because the other ways too, that if you consider, and we could talk about it, we could go into it later. If you pull up every reference Paul makes about women, towards women, context of worship, context out of worship, placement of women from Paul's mouth, this is not cohesive with his overall, the way he overall speaks about women, the way he addresses women within a worship context. So if we're going to take one section of scripture, call it 100 words, and we're going to weigh that heavier than literal letters upon letters upon letters, where he references to women, their placement, their value, what they can do, what they can't do. And we're going to put this section above everything else Paul has said across churches in over years. I find that to be exegetically irresponsible. I find that to be eisegesis, because it's usually more authoritative men who are pushing that. And they're choosing one example towards one church that's very out of the ordinary as far as the way Paul talks about women in general. And they're making that the rule instead of the exception. In my opinion, this is the exception. It is not the rule. And again, everybody take it as they will. Everybody has an opinion. But that is how I approach that exegetically. I find it to be irresponsible to make that just definitive claim. It seems to make more sense with everything else you read about in Corinth and everything else you read about how Paul addresses women, their placement, their purpose, their value, what they can do, what they can't do, within and without of a worship setting. It makes more sense that Corinth was jacked up. Women were doing things they shouldn't have been doing. Men were doing things they shouldn't have been doing. And he seems to be speaking directly to the Corinthian people. That is my opinion. Hate me or love me. Moving on. 11. Nevertheless, in the Lord, woman is not independent of man, nor man of woman. Both men and women are created by God of equal value, but they were created in an order. And you've read that now 3 times in the past 5 verses. He's not removing value from women, like a lot of people like to say. He's addressing the order of things. He's not addressing anything that has to do with value whatsoever. And that is a very common misconception that it aggravates the hell out of me. 12. For as woman was made from man, so man is now born of woman. And that is where he gives a little bit of equalization. And if you read a lot of Paul, and specifically when he's talking about marriage or placement within the man and the woman, a lot of the times he does that. He'll equalize it eventually. And he'll say something that's similar to this. Nevertheless, the Lord, woman is not independent of man, nor man of woman. So he's trying to equalize a little bit there. 12, again, as a woman was made from man, so man now born of woman, equalizer. And all things are from God. Continued equalization. 13, judge for yourselves. It is proper for a wife to pray to God with her head uncovered. Is it proper for a wife to pray to God with her head uncovered? 14, does not nature itself teach you that if a man wears long hair, it is a disgrace for him? 15, but if a woman has long hair, it is her glory. The Greek text, if you're looking at 14, again, can go either way. It seems to be referring to a general opinion. And this would make sense with the culture of the time. At the time, that was odd. Nowadays, that's not really odd. You have a lot of women with short hair who are still very feminine, and you have a lot of men with long hair who are burly, tough men. They're not effeminate men, and these women are not masculine women. At the time, culturally, that's exactly what it was. If a woman had short hair, she was masculine, and she was acting masculine, specifically, again, in Corinth. And if you had a man with long hair, 9.9 times out of 10, this man was acting, behaving in a way that was effeminate. So this makes more sense, in my opinion, of what he's probably referring to, and that these things were appropriate in the culture at the time. For her hair is given to her for a covering. Just continuing on. 16, if anyone is inclined to be contentious, we have no such practice. nor do the churches of God. The contentious comment. Paul means that if his opinions will not be accepted by some in the church, then he does not have an alternative solution for you. This is what he's saying. This is what he's trying to get across to you. The Corinthians needed to kind of make up their mind or make a decision on what their resolution for this was going to be. Because again, this is a letter to a specific church. They need to come up with a resolution on this to bring back the unity that was in the church. Because this was something that was causing division. It was causing problems. That's why he's constantly saying, although there are divisions among you, though there be divisions among you. Paul maintains that if this is to continue to be a dividing issue after his solution has been implemented, they will need to find another alternative. So he's saying, what he's literally saying is, if you guys can't make this work, I don't know how else to help you. This is I'm at my wit's end type of statement when you read it in the original. It's emotional, it's exhaustion. If you guys can't figure this out with all this stuff that I'm giving you, all of this addressing of the same things over and over, I'm telling you, I cannot help you. I don't know what else to do for you. Do I need to stop there first? You guys have anything real quick? I know it's a lot. And again, I always wish I could tell you just straight answer, but I will never lie about this stuff. I'm going to tell you exactly what I know, what I don't know, and then I'll give you my opinion sometimes. And I'm giving it here. This is my opinion.
That made a lot of sense to me. I mean, like, Paul's a big, like, if it causes you to stumble, don't do it. Same thing with the food. Don't eat it if you know it's to an idol. If, like you said back then, the head covering, if that was something sexual, that's why he didn't get married. The whole marriage thing.
Exactly.
Like, if you can go without lusting, then, don't. But if people are going to be lusting and causing them to sin in church, then in Corinth, if that's a big thing, then they need to cover their head.
Yeah.
That's a distraction, like you said. And
that's a good example. The marriage. Yeah. If you guys can't do this, get married. Just go get married.
And like you said, he was doing the order. Like, he was saying, like, man was first, then woman. He's not saying one's better than the other. He's literally telling you, like, birds fly.
Yes.
Can't argue that.
Yeah, exactly.
Like, it's just, this is how it is. So
exactly. And I really appreciate.
Makes a lot of sense.
Yeah. No, for sure. And I always really appreciate with Paul that he does those equalizing verses most of the time after things that are having to do with a man and a wife in their role. A lot of the time, he'll then refer them to God and refer the man to Christ to try to equalize and make more sense of it, more clarity from it. Does this, all right, Marshall, I think comes down to intent with stuff like, that was from before. I also agree with Drew, even with intent, if you are convicted of it, I think it's not the thing to do. Yeah, 100%. 100%. Shannon, in your opinion, do you believe that there's a reason, that's the reason why some people assume that women with shorter hair are masculine? I shaved part of my head a few years ago and was judged harshly. Maybe. I think it's always kind of been like that. I feel like it's becoming more and more. Well, let me correct that, actually. Say 10 years ago, I feel like women with shorter hair was becoming more accepted. Now, you could say some people would automatically think lesbian or something like that. But I think, like, they called it when I was growing up, the Kansas City mom cut. And this was like the bowl cut that like a suburban mom would have. That would be in Corinth considered to be masculine. Especially if that woman acted in a masculine way. Most Kansas City suburban moms who had that haircut were not acting in a masculine way. They were still very feminine. They just had short hair. But I think all through history, it's always kind of been perceived that women have long hair and men have short hair. And then I feel like up until about 5-10 years ago, that was starting to shift until this whole trans culture war thing started. Because now you have this massive public image of women with short hair who have the green and the blue in it and the piercings. But now, instead of technically being masculine, in a lot of cases it still is, but now sometimes it's nothing, non-binary or gender fluid or Z's or Z, whatever. But they're not even taking a gender at all. So I think
I
it's
was
always
gonna
been
say-
confusing. What's that?
Oh no, I was just gonna say, like, I'd also think about, I don't know if it's like judging somebody or like a image context, but like if anybody watched The Big Bang Theory, like people got mad when Penny cut her hair.
Yeah.
But like if you look at Penny, you're like, nah, she's not trying to be a guy.
No.
But I mean, like you said, if you see the the piercing and the purple, you're like,
Yeah, if you go the whole way.
So I guess somebody's probably judging Shannon in a way, but
I'm
man,
sure. Yeah.
unless she was in like a wife beater and
Yeah.
like colored her hair, then
Yeah.
it's probably just maybe somebody that's a little more old fashioned, or I don't know.
Yeah, no, I agree. I think it's pretty accepted now for women to have short hair. I think you've got to go the extra mile and put the color in it and have the piercings and whatnot. I don't know, but that's me personally, and I'm very liberal with stuff like that. I don't think oddly of a woman with short hair, but I think we have it kind of ingrained in us too, because it's kind of cross cultural for the most part. There are countries where women shave their heads, but it's just kind of something that's been ingrained in humans.
Well, like you said, the Kansas City
Forever.
cut or whatever, it's just easier. I've had long hair, and it's
Yeah,
harder
me
to
too.
get ready.
Yeah. Yeah.
When you shave it, you just wake up and go.
Yes.
You don't have to worry about
For sure. Yeah,
The
I mean,
very
I've had
moms
long hair
and
too.
soccer practice and baseball
Yeah,
practice and this
yeah.
and that. Like, they don't have time to mess with it.
I have a lot of political opinions on that, but I'm not going to get into it. Yeah.
I'm full of political opinions.
I have that too. The leftist tears cup. Now you got to get the Mug Club cup.
Yeah, I do.
He just came back finally. Thank God. There's a strong Christian worship female in my church, has bright purple hair. And I don't think there's anything wrong with that. So if I came across that way, I totally misrepresented myself. Colored hair is not a problem. And even in the LGBT, like whatever, we're just talking about cultural norms and how people perceive people based on the way that they look.
A lot of people actually do it. It's there's one lady who I used to work with who did it. It's I think it's a breast cancer awareness thing, or
Really?
it's it's something, the purple, because she'd have
Oh.
a streak of purple in her hair for like 1 month out of the year, and I
No,
forgot
you're right.
what it was. I mean, I don't know if that's what Karina's talking about, but I know that some women do it. It's in support of something.
Yeah, no, I think you're right. That sounds familiar. I mean, my kid wants to dye her hair. Not that at this age, obviously not on my watch, but I'm not against it for any particular reason other than she's young. But man, who knows? People color their hair. That in and of itself doesn't mean anything, but all right, if you guys don't have anything else, where are we at? 17. Oh man, we got a lot here. I can't wait for 12. The spiritual gifts chapter is so good. All right, let's jump back in then. All right, but in the following instructions, I do not commend you. And let me see here real quick before I get carried away with myself. I wrote some stuff down. Bear with me.
I'd say if
sorry.
you have to, you can. I mean, I know usually you need to go by 7:15. I got all the time in the world, but if you need to, maybe you can do this part next week and then just do 12. I don't know. That's up to you. I'm just here for the ride.
Let me see. No, we can burn through it. We can burn through it.
Okay, I'm good.
All right. But in the following instructions, I do not commend you, because when you came together, it is not for the better, but for the worse. For in the first place, when you come together as a church, I hear that there are divisions among you. And I believe it in part, for there must be a faction among you in order that those who are genuine among you may be recognized. 20. When you come together, it is not the Lord's Supper that you eat, referring again to idolatry. 24. For in eating, each one goes ahead with his own meal. One goes hungry, another gets drunk. 22. What? Do you not have houses to eat and drink in? Or do you despise the church of God and humiliate those who have nothing? What shall I say to you? Shall I commend you for this? No, I will not. This is beautiful. And this is why I love you.
That's why I was laughing.
This is what is happening. The Lord's, we've talked about it a lot in little pieces. The Lord's Supper was massive for Corinth specifically, but in the age of the New Testament altogether. So it was a really, really meaningful get together of believers outside of normal worship where they would all come together and share a meal. It was hugely, hugely important because it was, as communion is, it was their communion, right? So it's this idea of drinking the wine to represent Christ's blood and to eat the bread representing Christ's body. It's all about what Jesus did for them. What was happening was the more well-off Corinthians financially and status-wise, because they were one and the same during this time, they would come and they would eat all the food and they would get drunk before, you call them the blue-collar Christians who are working, would be able to get there. So Paul heard about this and he's like, what the hell is wrong with you? Do you not have food at home that you can eat and then come share in this celebration, come share in this sacrament? What is wrong with you? This is angry. This is not like joking. It's not irony. It's not sarcasm. He's pissed. He's not happy. They're coming, the rich, the well-off, they're coming, they're getting drunk, they're eating all the food, and they're leaving crap food. They're leaving table scraps, essentially, for the lower class congregants. So there's really nothing there when they get there. And in doing that, his reference to humiliation was the blue collar, the workers would come and to celebrate as well. And this would be status-wise in the culture would be extremely embarrassing for them because it showed, one, that they were poor. And it's obviously just embarrassing showing up to a meal late, technically, and not having anything. And knowing that the rich people are full and now they're also drunk as well. So this is one of not that many examples where Paul is actually pissed. He's angry, and it's beautiful. 23. For I received from the Lord what I delivered to you, that the Lord Jesus, on the night when he was betrayed, took the bread, and when he had given thanks, he broke it and said, "This is my body, which is for you. Do this in remembrance of me." 25. In the same way, he also took the cup after supper, saying, "This cup is the new covenant in my blood. Do this as often as you drink it, in remembrance of me. For as often as you eat this bread and drink the cup, you proclaim the Lord's death until he comes." Referring to the second coming of Christ. 27. Whoever therefore eats the bread or drinks the cup of the Lord in an unworthy manner, referring to what they were doing, will be guilty concerning the body and the blood of the Lord. This was insanely insulting. It's very harsh. In English, not so much, but it's very harsh. 28. Let a person examine himself then, and so eat of the bread and drink of the cup. 29. For anyone who eats and drinks without discerning the body eats and drinks judgment on himself. Again, this is very, very blunt. 30. This is why many of you are weak and ill, and some of you have died. Brutal. 31. Actually, yeah, hold on. So that verse 30 there, this is why many of you are weak and ill, and some of you have died. If you remember in 10, tons of Old Testament references talking about a whole lot of judgment. He brings some of it here into 11 as well. So it's representing God's judgment for their failure to recognize all believers as the body of Christ, and instead kind of siloing themselves into this higher placement where they felt deserving of being able to get drunk and eating all the food before everybody else got there. Disobedience in the ancient world is often linked to disease and death, and he's referring back to all of the times throughout the Old Testament where, again, it did not bode well for people who behaved this way. God was vengeful and full of righteous justice. 32. But when we are judged by the Lord, did I skip it? 31. But if we judged ourselves truly, we would not be judged. Meaning, if you self-govern, then you're not going to be under that judgment. You need to take care of yourself. Look at what you're doing. Be self-aware. 32. But when we are judged by the Lord, we are disciplined so that we may not be condemned along with the world. So him referencing Christians to worldly people, which he does a lot in the letters to the Corinthians, which he doesn't do as much in other letters, which is another testament to their specific culture, both the church culture and the culture of this geographical location, is very, it's very specific and it's very noteworthy. 33. So then, my brothers, when you come together to eat, wait for one another. There's more of your context to understand what I was explaining before. They were not waiting. Wait for one another. Eat together. 34. If anyone is hungry, let him eat at home, so that when you come together, it will not be for judgment. That is sarcasm. About the other thing, I will give directions when I come.
It's too much to write.
Yeah. He's like, we'll talk when I get there. Okay. We'll have a chat.
I feel like 32 could be more that help with that like weed question or alcohol question. Like when you're judged, like you're disciplined. Could that be like, I don't know, like every time you smoke, something bad happens, you're gonna be like, man, so you're not like condemned with the rest, so you don't keep sinning. I don't know.
I mean, personal conviction wise, for sure. In that verse is a reference to the second coming, but personal conviction wise, what you're saying is 100% true. Yeah. If that's like, for sure. I've talked to people who say like, every time I smoke weed, I feel really guilty, and they're Christians. And I'm like, well, what do you think that means? And then I just stare at them and they're like, oh, like, yeah, if you feel that way, then probably don't do it, and then see how you feel. And then if you want to try again in 6 months or a year, try again. And if you still feel guilty and it's not about your family and it's not about this and it's not about that, then, you're probably not supposed to smoke weed. Don't smoke weed. There's a strong Christian worship. Oh, we read that. Communion. Yeah. Do you guys, or Drew, do you have anything? And anybody else, if you got something, throw it in now. Otherwise, we'll start wrapping it up.
Yeah, only thing I got left is the like in an unworthy manner. I know he's talking about Corinth, but I feel like that could be today too, because like some people that do it every week and they just do it, do it.
Yeah.
I don't feel like that's a good reason, but I don't know. I don't know if that counts as an unworthy manner. I don't know.
No, I'd say it does. I'd say it definitely could. Praise Lucifer. We've got some Satanists over on TikTok.
I was like, what? I didn't see that comment.
Yeah. Oh, man. I forgot this was even going.
Man, I might have to get it just to see your comments on that. I bet that's wild.
I'm not long for the TikTok world, my man. I've got 2 strikes already.
What? What do you mean?
They're going to ban me real soon.
For what?
I don't know, but I have a warning on there now. So the one on Instagram, the one about women preachers, that got a strike. No idea why. And then I redid it 2 more times. The second one got a strike. And the third one they let me put up. And it was very bland and plain, just talking about the information.
Well, so, after 3, you're banned?
Yeah, after 3. I think it's temporary, like 30 days or something. But yeah, so after the women one got stricken, they went all the way back to December. And now every couple days they're banning a video. So somebody from TikTok is obviously manually going through the page now and hitting it. So they're saying if I get one more, which I'm sure they will, because they're obviously doing it on purpose, then I get banned for X amount of time.
You know that when that happens, you're right over the
yeah
where you need to be.
Yeah, I'm happy with it. I'm good with it. Whatever happens.
Wear it as a badge.
Yeah, right. All right. You guys have anything else? We covered a lot. So
I think I'm gonna watch this one a few more times and take like 3 pages of notes.
It's packed, man.
Just
these are packed.
What you said.
I love these. They're tough though, man. There's a lot of them that are tough like this. 12 is tough too. It's much easier to talk about and to kind of decipher, but what is it? 11 here. 11's rough with the head coverings. It's one of those ones that's just genuinely hard. Just to read is hard to make sense of it. So it's one of those ones you have to go outside of what you're reading and try to get the surrounding. Like, this is where hermeneutics and exegesis are. You have to.
Well, that's why
Otherwise, it makes no sense.
I'm glad you're doing this because, like, usually this is what people go to church for because they need a preacher or the priest or whatever to like dive deeper and explain these things.
Yeah.
But nowadays, they realize a lot of churches don't. They just kind of
sucks, man. It sucks. Anybody who goes to those churches, you need to count your blessings and be very grateful that you have a church that seriously gets into it and tries to actually explain what's going on. But yeah, these are rough. I wish it was more cut and dry, but I feel like once you get outside the text and you start looking at everything else, it gets more clear, man. At least clear enough to function off of it, even if you don't know for sure exactly what he was saying or what he intended. But once you get into everything else, he was talking about women, the fact that he appointed women leaders, he put women first in regards of text, which is something you don't do. There's all these other little pieces that say like, maybe this was specific to a group of people that just so happened to be god awful. So it kind of makes sense.
Well, I bet if you like went to those churches and said like that verse 22 where Paul's pissed and like explained like the rich were getting their first and eating, I bet a lot of priests or preachers would be like, "What are you talking about?" Like probably wouldn't even know that.
Yeah.
They, probably wouldn't even know. I like hearing the Greek and the Hebrew and what it actually means and what it could mean. And
yeah, you got to be honest.
It matters.
It drives me insane because there's so many terms in Greek that mean two different things that like they're not synonymous. And in a lot of cases, they're very different things. Like source and authority, they're kind of similar. So that one's not bad. But there's a lot of instances where like they mean totally different things. So if you're not being honest about the fact that if the context isn't clear, then you are shooting in the dark, and you need to just be honest about that and say that it could be this and it could be this. But instead, people choose based on bias and opinion and whatever general message they're trying to get across. It's extremely frustrating. I don't feel like anything you have said goes against community standards. You're preaching the word as it should be. Yeah, on YouTube, I'm good. On Instagram, I'm good. On Facebook, I'm good. On Twitter, I'm good. On TikTok, they are hitting me over the head with a hammer. And none of the content is different. I post the exact same stuff everywhere. So TikTok has just taken a liking to me as of this past week. And they're it's only a matter of time. They're going to shut the account down. So I'm going to make a backup. But what I've been told is they're very good at finding the backup and then hitting you on the head with the hammer again. I won't be surprised you get canceled on TikTok. Yeah, me either. Yeah, I've appealed them, Shannon. They tell me to go eat sand. One of the times they're like, okay, you're right. We shouldn't have banned this. And then ever since then, everything I appeal, they say, no, banned. Can't post that. And they're things that exist on every other social media without an issue.
Well, it's like, they like don't some like extremist groups have pages? Like ISIS has a page.
Yes, they do.
It's like, what?
I've been like putting on my story on TikTok for the past couple of days now. Like, you need to follow me somewhere else because this ain't gonna last long. And I'm like, man, all these conspiracies that I see, like there's some wild stuff on TikTok. There is some harmful stuff on TikTok. And I'm like, you're gonna take down a video where I say women should be able to speak in a church? That's wild. That's bizarre.
No, they probably didn't. I don't know.
It's crazy.
Just
the other one was about how only women have menstrual periods or menstrual cycles. So that one I can kind of see. But again, with what I've seen on TikTok, that got taken down is just, I feel targeted. Christianity is now considered controversial these days. Yeah, I agree with that.
Unfortunately.
I agree with that. But sees that anything can be counted as controversial and it's sad. Yeah, for sure.
It's just
it's all bias.
Subjective. Yeah,
exactly. 100%.
I'm offended.
Subjective.
And I work at TikTok's whatever department.
It's crazy. Especially for a Chinese company.
Blocked.
You'd think they want it to be as wicked as possible. That would be my assumption.
They're the more, the man over the woman thing, aren't they?
Yeah. Yeah, big time. Big time. All right, if you guys have nothing else, we'll wrap up. I've got the prayer request up here, Drew.
I didn't see anything.
How are they doing?
They're good. They actually went to school today, which I didn't think was going to happen.
Oh, wow,
So
nice.
I think somehow like I woke up and they were terrible, and I was like, oh man. Like one nose was like green and gross, and the other one was like bloody, and I was like, oh my
Oh,
gosh.
lovely.
But it went away. It went away.
Good.
I don't know.
That's good, man.
So you can take that off the list already.
They're totally good now?
Yeah.
Good enough to go to school, but
Yeah, their
That's
noses
good.
were still running, but it was clear, so
That's
I'm good with
beautiful.
clear. I don't care about clear.
Clear is good. Yeah. Clear is get out of my house. Go learn.
Yes. Get out.
All right, you guys got 10 seconds if you want anything for prayer, and then we'll hit it and we'll get out of here. We're right on time.
Joe's got 5 minutes before he gets beat over the head.
I know. I'll get hit with a flip-flop in my sleep. Dun, dun. All right. Well, while I fill the time, tomorrow I've got a video scheduled. If anybody knows who the Young Turks are, if you're into news and politics, it's a left-leaning, independent-ish media source. And apparently, I don't watch sports, but apparently during the Super Bowl, there was a Jesus commercial from this very progressive Christian organization. Cat says, by her. Yes, hit in a flip-flop while I sleep by you. There's this very progressive Christian organization. I can't remember what it's called. But the Young Turks, a very left-leaning media source, did a segment on it and completely bastardized Jesus's character, saying that he was progressive, saying that he's a communist, saying all these wild things. And the video is about that. So it's really in a sentence, the video is about who Jesus actually was. And all scripture is provided, all instances are provided of his absolute requirement of morality and justice, and the fact that he was a very insulting person, actually. If you genuinely read some of the things that he said to people and about people.
Not all love and happiness.
He was not always nice. And in no way did he love everyone. Everything was about justice. And everything was go on and sin no more. So they misrepresented him horribly. It was very entertaining. So if that would interest you, that'll be up tomorrow.
That.
It was
Ben
fun.
Shapiro's destroyed the Young Turks a few times.
Yeah, you watch Daily Wire. So. Yeah, they love the Young Turks. They're awful. Those people are awful. Cenk Uygur and that girl, they're just awful. All right, let's get out of here then. God, thank you for another opportunity to bring us all together. This has been beyond a blast for everybody to kind of get into it a little bit deeper than most of us normally do. Please allow us to continue to be able to do this and to be able to keep an open mind. Let us try to dig even deeper. If anybody is able to get any time during the week, that we all get a push from you to get into it ahead of time so we can have deeper conversations about it. And just go further, go that extra mile. Pray that Drew's kids continue to be clear and not green, and that they're able to continue to go to school, that they're feeling good, that they stay healthy, that Kat does not beat me over the head with a shoe this evening, my lovely spouse. But God, we pray seriously for we need a revival. And after Asbury in Kentucky, there have been reports all across the country of Christian churches and universities specifically getting together in ways that they don't normally. And this is a really, really good sign. It's really encouraging. I pray that you continue to do whatever it is that you're doing. Continue to move people in the way that you're moving them in this direction of revival, that people keep clear minds, that people see objective truth, that people go away from the subjective ideals that are being shoved in our faces and down our throats on a daily basis, that we keep that clarity, we keep that full understanding of what is actually going on, what actually is and what is not, what is reality and what is false. And that we can all speak up more, that we can all be more honest, and that we don't let these things of culture seep into our personal lives. I pray that everybody here makes an honest effort to go outside of themselves at some point this week, to touch somebody else, to speak to somebody else, to have some kind of dialogue, some kind of interaction that in whatever way brings them closer to you, whether that be through clarity, whether that be through joining them in an event. Let everybody here have a genuine urge to get outside of themselves, to connect with other people. We are in a world that is increasingly going downhill. that is increasingly hurt and confused and deluded by absolute evil forces. And there are, even within your church, people who are lost and are very confused. We pray that those people get clarity of their own, and that those of us that are in the church, that are around other Christians who may be stumbling, that we can listen to Paul and the things that we're reading and not be part of that perpetuation, not be part of what causes people to stumble more, but that we can be like Paul and stay sturdy, stay steady, and be a proper, good example of what this is supposed to look like, what we are supposed to do. Pray this all in Jesus' name. Amen.
Amen.
Everybody have a lovely, Kat says, pray harder, darling. Oh, God, I don't want to leave the office. All right. We will see you guys Sunday. And any prayer requests can always go in. I would love Ben Shapiro to be the president, man. I would do anything for this. I think the Daily Wire should just become the new government, just as a whole.
I would take it.
They'd do phenomenal.
Ben would do the laws, and Matt Walsh would just be the judge.
Yeah. He would be all of Congress, just Matt Walsh.
Clavin would be the comedian.
Oh, he's so great. Fabulous. All right, guys, have a good couple of days. We will see you Sunday, 6 p.m. doing. What are we doing? 12 and 13.
Okay.
Which is spiritual gifts. We already talked about it. Spiritual gifts is really, really good. So if that's something you're personally confused about, or that you haven't quite dialed in, or that you've become confused about, definitely try to make it, because it's really good, or watch the recording, whatever. But it's deep. It's kind of straightforward, but there are things to obviously be talked about. And then the way we love is also just a very interesting chapter, full of real good stuff. Beautiful. All right. DeSantis. I'm a DeSantis guy too, for sure. Yeah. Mercedes.
DeSantis Shapiro.
Yeah, watch the recording. Mercedes. It was good. These two chapters are some of the rough ones here in this book. They're very confusing. They're very packed full of stuff, but they're really, really rich. Super
Well, it
rich.
seemed very short, cut, and dry for me, and then Joe expands everything. So good one. Good stuff. Yeah, Mercedes, watch it.
All right, Drew, you're good whenever. I will keep us up for like 30 seconds in case you guys have anything else last minute, and then we'll shut down here at we'll stay at 7:19. This will all die, cease to exist for a couple of days.
Which will probably be like 7:17 for them. It's usually behind. Not about that much.
Oh, is it?
It's a little behind.
Okay.
Just like when I watch myself on YouTube, it's like something I did 20 seconds ago.
Lagged out. Okay. I've been watching the recording since I haven't been able to catch the live. It's been so good. I'm sorry Drew and I were discussing last week about how to try to make the recordings better, so it's not full of just useless chatter or just like small talk or whatever. I will figure it out, or maybe I'll cut these up into like, I don't have time for that. I'd like to be able to do that. Just
let us know. Tell us when we're talking too much.
Yeah, I mean, what we need to do is we need to try to like keep it all at the beginning and all of it at the end. And then I think I can put like markers of some kind or something. You lag, Kat. You are a lagger. All right, 30 seconds, we'll shut off. Burning desires, and we're out of here. Remember, if you read ahead, you might have some things pop out at you. And if you let me know ahead of time in the Discord, then I will be able to get you a much more adequate answer. Try to add as much value to these as possible. I try to get everything I think anyone could possibly ask, but I'm sure I miss things along the way.
Well, that's what the questions are for later anyway.
Yeah, exactly.
In the Discord. because it is past 7:15, and hopefully Kat doesn't have 2 sandals.
All right. We're out of here. Love you guys. Have a great couple days. We'll see you Sunday night at 6 p.m. Central Time.
Deuces.
Or in the Discord before. Later, Drew.